Hi everyone, this is the Magic Behind the Mastery TV with Michael McDonald, and today we have a very special guest. We have KM Johnson Davis with us. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So what I thought I'd do is I thought we'd start off. You could tell the people that are watching this a little bit about you, what you do, and then we'll get started. All right. So tell people about yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Cam Johnson Davis. I am out of the beautiful state of Texas in the U.S., and I am a lifestyle entrepreneur, business consultant, published author, and life coach. What I like to do is help people who have that unrealized dream, bring it to fruition, and know that they can conquer it, make it happen, and attack any obstacles that come in the way along the way.
That sounds awesome. So when we first start then, so this is more about you than what you do. So share with us your earliest important moment. So where did things really start kicking off for you?
I would say things began to kick off when I had the realization that of what I was called to do. When I was actually working in a weight loss in the weight loss industry, I remember I was talking with one of my clients, and she was so inspired by the way that I encouraged her every week when she came in that she was like, "You should become a life coach." And at the time, I had no clue what a life coach was. I didn't even know where to find any information about being a life coach. And so I began to research it. And then at the time, I was also in the military. I ended up taking some time away. I went on a 8-day, 7-night birthday week in Puerto Rico, and just kind of said, I need to figure out what it is that I need to do. She's saying I should be a life coach. I don't know what a life coach is. I'm in weight loss right now. I'm also in the military. I need to figure out, what direction my life is going in. And so I used that time to reflect. And during that time, I started asking myself a bunch of questions. I had a list of questions to kind of really dig deep and say, what direction are you going in? What is it that you are truly passionate about? And I remember I was sitting in my bed and breakfast watching CNN or MSNBC because it was like the only channel that was in English. And I remember them talking about success and knowing what your definition is of success. And I was like, I've never really tried to determine my definition. I've kind of always gone off of what people have told me success should be. And so as I listened, they talked about, thinking about the things that you've done all your life, the different achievements that you've accomplished, even starting from grade school. And so, along with the list of questions I had already determined I was going to reflect on that week, I start asking myself, okay, well, what did you do? And I remember my notebook, I made all these different columns of all the things that I achieved, the certificates that I had received, certificates of appreciation, or any clubs that I had been in high school or junior high or anything. And I started to find out, like, what is it that connects these things? Like, when I look at this list, what is it that brings them all together and says, this is who you are, this is what you're interested in? And that's kind of how I would say that was like the beginning of me realizing that at the end of the day, I wanted to help people.
Okay. Talk me through what you did in the military then. That was the first thing that sort of piqued my interest. So what was it like being in the military?
Oh, wow. Well, I joined the military at a young age. I joined the military when I was actually 17 and still in high school. So that at the end of, once I graduated, I immediately went into the military. And to be perfectly honest with you, as I tell people all the time, I grew up in the military. I grew up in the Army, because I was just a teenager when I went in. And I got out a few years ago. So most of my adult life was had in the military. For me, it was a building of character, helping me to understand who I am and what I'm capable of. I didn't go into the military because I had to. I went into the military because I wanted to, unlike most people. And so I think, now when I reflect on my military experience, I'm able to see, who KM Johnson really is. Like, she was always there. These are the things that showed up. When I was in the military, I deployed twice, once to Bosnia, once to Iraq. I was an enlisted soldier. I ended up being awarded a green to gold scholarship, which is where you go from being an enlisted soldier to being an officer. So I became an officer along the way. They paid for my college. So I actually was able to leave active duty and go to college full time, and they paid for it. And then I came back in reserves, so I got a lot out of the military in my experience there. And then, like I said, I left as an officer. I was an accountant when I came in. I was a human resources officer when I left. I met my husband while I was deployed. I published my first book while I was deployed. Like, there was a lot of things that I was able to accomplish while being in the military.
Well, it seems like it was pretty intense. Then, what was there anything that sticks out as memorable or as important? So you mentioned the book and meeting your husband and things, but was there anything in particular that feel like it's made a big difference to who you are today?
A lot. I mean, when I was on my first deployment, I remember, being there, and that was when I was in Bosnia. And I remember being there and just kind of saying, what do I want to do next? Because I was at a crossroads, and that was, I believe it was Turkey at the time. And so I'd asked my command sergeant major if I could go. And because I had done so well and had all these different achievements like Soldier of the Month and Soldier of the Year, I had a little bit of favor in that department. And, he was like, well, let me see what I can do. That right there showed me that, it's not necessarily always who you know. I know we go around saying, oh, you got to know this with the right people, but your work effort and ethic can add a difference, but you can't sit around and wait for people to recognize it or acknowledge it. You have to be bold enough to step forward and say, hey, I did this and I'm asking for this because that I'm a good person, I'm a good soldier. Can you do this for me? You have to be able to stand up for yourself. That first part of me being in the military, honestly, because I was young and I was, it was new to me. I was away from my family, obviously. It taught me that I was still, I was very determined, that was a really big thing about me, and that I was very ambitious. And so I think it kind of grounded that in me. It said, okay, this is who you are. Because, we spend most of our life trying to figure out who we are. That's why we change different jobs, or we, we're taking all these quizzes and surveys online. And so, and most kids, when they go to when they get out of high school and they go to college, that's what they're doing. They're figuring out who they are, so it's the same thing with those who go straight into the military, I believe. Anytime you enter into anything right after you leave high school, you're on a quest to figure out who you are. And so I think that, like I said, growing up in the military as my, my quote unquote, and being so young, it helped me to learn some things about myself that now as an adult, when I look back, I can say, wow, I was always this person. And that's something that's really important to have, Michael, because if you don't, we get lost along the way. We get to the certain place as an adult in our careers, in our businesses, in our lives. And then we forget those things, those core things that are inside of us that made us who we are. But if you start to look at all the jobs and positions that you've had along the way, you start to realize that they stuck out, that they were integral parts of what you were doing. And so it starts to help you to see this is who you are.
Right. So is it almost like there were a lot of common themes then with some of the things that you felt sort of contributed to you as a person then? What was the common theme of the things that you went through?
Like, I know a lot of people have war stories when it comes to the military. And the military, I have some. I can tell you about missiles, flying past me while I'm in a helicopter going across, from one fob to another. Yeah. I can tell you about the bombing that happened while I was in Iraq, and people down getting struck by a missile. Those things did happen. It wasn't all fruits and berries and laughs and giggles, but I've always been the type of person not to reflect on those things. If I sat here and thought about all the negative, hard things that happened while I was in the military, I would probably be sitting somewhere like on the 5th floor of a hospital or something, because it would drive me crazy. And so I chose to look at the things that helped me to build and grow. And honestly, there were a lot of struggles along the way. Aside, let's talk about the fact that, it's a little obvious, but the fact that I'm an African-American female, as an enlisted soldier, that's fine. But when it comes to being an officer, it changes things. And it wasn't always easy. There were times where I was the only female in a room, the only female officer, with a bunch of male officers. And I had to prove that I was worthy to stand in that room with them. Right. And, and that wasn't easy. And I know a lot of women, officers have the same type of story. So it's, but I think, again, remember how I was saying back then, I said, I kind of determined that I wasn't going to let my race or my gender be a hindrance or be the reason why anything, positive or negative, I wanted it to be my results, my work, what I'm giving you to be the indicator that, you look past the person and you see, you look past the person you see on the outside and see my heart, see my work, see my soul, see my spirit, see what it is that I'm giving to you and how I am, benefiting you, and how that should be the reason, why I get this particular award or I'm giving this opportunity. And so I think that part, like I said, I started off in the military young. I deployed to Bosnia. We returned from Bosnia. They PCS'd me to the Netherlands. So I lived in the Netherlands for 2 years, in Brunsum, and I worked in Maastricht. And there again, I worked for NATO. While I was working for NATO, there was a time where I was the only American in the office. And everyone spoke Dutch or German, and all my contracts that came through my desk were in German and Dutch. So by default now, I can read Dutch and German, thankful to that position. Yeah. However, I can't speak it very well, but I can read it, but so again, like these, I don't see anything negative, even though someone on the outside might look at it and say, oh, get bitter about certain situations. I just say they built me into who I am. They gave me a pocketbook of experience so I can take it with me and be a better person for myself, my family, and my clients.
But, it's very interesting when you say that it's whether or not you focus on as you say, you focus on all of the things that happen that were not so great. You could put you in a hospital, as you say, and I think that sometimes the only way to I guess the only way to move forwards is to focus on the things that do actually build you up. But I think that's an important thing to for a lot of the people watching this to take away, is that there's, even if there's only one good thing and a whole host of bad, there's always an option, isn't there? There's always that choice to go, okay, well, yes, there's bullets flying around, yes, there's missiles and whatnot, but you focus on the things that you want to focus on at the end of the day, and you seem to have done that really well.
Yes. I was just thinking when you were talking, my mother called me the other day, right? And she said she was having a horrible day, that all these different things went wrong when she woke up. And she was like, she was late for work, to get the dinner on before she went to work, just a list of things. And I told her, I said, okay, just stop, take a deep breath. And I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I want you to do it anyway. Repeat after me. I will have a great day. I'm determined to have a great day. Today will be the best day ever, and nothing will stop that. And then I said, now just continue your day believing that. Very simple. I know it doesn't really like any magic or anything like that, right? But, I just said I was like, purpose your mind to say that this is what's going to happen today. She called me when she got off work and she said, do you know what? I had the best day ever today. And I was happy because I said, exactly, because you changed your mindset from the very beginning and you determined that you weren't going to think about all those things that went wrong, but you were going to think about how it could go right.
Excellent. All right. So what happened after the military then? So that was me sort of trying to pick out something that I think was important, but what else happened post-military then? What happened next?
Well, because I was in the reserves, a lot of things began to happen simultaneously. So it was, once I got out of active duty and went into the reserves, I was stuck with, I was faced with that whole, what am I going to do with my life? Which is so funny because when I was in active duty, I never had to think about that because my job was the military, every day, all day. But then when I went through my officer's training and I went to college, upon graduation, I originally was told that I was supposed to go back on active duty. So my paperwork was somehow messed up along the way, and I ended up going in the reserves. Now, I say it like that because I don't believe in coincidences. And although it really did, I really was supposed to go back on active duty, but I ended up reserves. And that was someone's fault. I can't really place blame anymore because I tell myself, there's a reason why that happened. Had that not have happened in that way, there's a lot of things that I've accomplished thus far that would have never transpired. There are important, phases of my life that happened that I would have never had the opportunity to experience. For instance, going reserves, I ended up having to go back home to Mississippi Gulf Coast, and I moved in with my aunt, who happened to live about 2 blocks from the beach, which is on the Gulf of Mexico. And about 2 months after I moved in with her, having graduated, from college, Hurricane Katrina hits and floods out everything. I think my little notebooks and everything's all in the Gulf of Mexico now. So I had to make a decision. At the time, I was working as a manager in a retail store. And they came to me and they said, where do you want to go? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to move? And I said, you know what? I'm single. Send me to New York. I've never been to New York. And so I packed up what I had left and I moved to New York. And I tell people that, they're like, you went to New York by yourself. Now, mind you, I think I was like 22 maybe, at the time. And I said, yes, I'll go to New York because it was an opportunity. And I was ready to seize that moment, seize that chance. Now, what I kind of skipped over, but while I was in college, I had my first business. So, I was already getting that bug of being an entrepreneur. So I started my first business as kind of a trial while I was in college. So now here I am moving, to New York, and the business is still, in the back of my mind. Like, okay, this is something I know I want to do. And I was trying to get everything organized and figure out where I was going to be situated. But, it's amazing how just that one experience took me from one end of the U.S. to the other, and it was a great, awesome experience.
Right. I don't think we're allowed to just skip over the fact that Hurricane Katrina hit. What was that like?
Just like any tragedy. I mean, it was crazy. I know on the news they portray how the levee broke in Louisiana, which is true what happened, but the hurricane itself actually hit where I'm from, my hometown. So that's where it hit. And so it was destroyed. I remember my sister and I went and we were walking along the beach, and I don't know what I did with the video that I took, but I remember we were filming like everything that we saw. And I mean, concrete roads were ripped up, boats that were on one side of the highway were now off in the ocean. There was areas like, I'm not a scaredy cat, but I guess I am a little bit, because there were areas on the beach that I didn't want to drive down, because not at certain times of the day, because there would be like these luminous clouds around boats that look a little creepy, because they weren't there before. And then suddenly they go, this big structure is out in the middle of the ocean, or not ocean, but, the Gulf. So, you have all the aftermath, but then it's the camaraderie that happened too. I remember like everyone on my dad's street was getting all of the meat that they had and kind of getting out in the middle of the street and barbecuing it and sharing it with the neighborhood, because of course the meat was going to go bad because there was no electricity. There were trucks handing out meal ready to eat, MREs from the military. I never had no juice before, but it was being given away. We were getting cases of water, like, all of that. And I remember before the hurricane happened, the night before, I was the closing manager of my store that I was working at. And we were supposed to be having a visit the following day from, our higher management. And so we had just waxed the floors and made the whole store perfect. And, now it was nothing but water and stuff. And I remember I dropped off the deposit, that night in the drop box at the bank. But the company I was working for, which I thought was really great, and it always stays in my mind. What they did was they pulled all their locations together, and all the money that was in the safe, they put all that money together and they split it up amongst all the employees that were in that area, just so that we could have cash, for a few days, along with our regular paychecks. And then they even, they provided counseling so that we could go and, talk about what happened. And they had a bus arranged so that we could all take a bus over to Alabama and, and sit there and talk about things. And I was going to all of my employees' houses. I think that was the military instinct in me, looking for them, making sure each and every one of them was okay. Families were okay. But it was an interesting, to say the least, experience. But I think, again, it's like any experience in your life, you get what you it doesn't have to be something also negative. Yes, it was horrible. It was devastating. I lost a lot and didn't get half of it, not even, a quarter of it back. But, on the other side, again, it showed me who I was. Wow.
Right. Well, what was it like? Because obviously you said that everybody came together afterwards. Obviously that in the moment it must have been obviously quite horrific to watch it happen. But when you saw everybody come together and everyone like work together to I suppose, get through it. What was that like? That must have been pretty amazing to see everyone working together.
It actually was. I mean, like I said, on my dad's street, you know, some of the neighbors we knew and some we didn't really know that well. You know, because you're used to, just think about it right now. You probably, I do it. I come home, I barely even speak to my my neighbors. I know what they look like. So I know that, you know, they live here, but I don't, you know, I don't normally just hang out with them. And so that's how day to day was before the hurricane. But then all of a sudden you put aside your differences because we have one thing in common. We all were affected by the hurricane. So now we all come together so we can try to figure this out and move past it. And so it was great to see that. And I guess I had a different vantage point because of the fact that I was living with my aunt at the time. And, you know, I had my dad, then I had my mom, and they both have, you know, their separate homes. And so each of their neighborhoods kind of showed me a different perspective of how people were reacting to what had happened.
Right, cool. Because yeah, I mean, it's there's that saying, isn't there? I mean, I think it was a joke more than anything, where someone said that the only way that we'd all band together is if aliens invaded, because the one thing we have in common is we're all on this planet. So it's almost like the thing that we have in common is what brings us together. So you mentioned, so we sort of go on. You were going to say something.
Well, no, I was going to say, well, that's kind of the definition of camaraderie. I mean, we become comrades because we have the same common interests, you know, the same common thing that we're for or against, or, you know, that we want to, you know, see happen. And so that's what makes us comrades. But we, you know, it's good to see that comes into effect, that, you know, so many people can have so much in common, but as a world, you might be right with the alien joke.
Yeah, no, it's not mine. I can't take credit for that. It was somebody else. So sort of moving ahead a little bit, then you mentioned having to move to New York. Then, so to talk me through what happened next. What happened after that?
Oh, wow. You know, I moved to New York. Of course, that was a new experience, you know, and I also had my military unit up there, and then I was working, and, you know, because I relocated my retail store. It was a great experience for me. It gave me the opportunity to experience New York. It gave me the opportunity to see what, you know, what the what is the song? If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
So I used to have to say that to myself, you know, New York, I can make it here. I know I can make it anywhere. But it gave me the opportunity to be away from everybody and everything, because think about it. I had gone from being in the military, active duty all day, every day, to going to college full time, to going back home, you know, with my family. And so there really wasn't a true transition of, I guess, like space to you know, I never really had that space to say, who am I outside of all these other things? And so being put in that position gave me that opportunity to say, okay, who are you? What do you want to do? What do you really want to do? You dibbled and dabbled, because my degree is in business. So I dibbled and dabbled with business while I was in college because I knew that was my interest. And while I was, you know, in the military, I was doing all these different things, you know, volunteering and going before the board and stuff like that. And now my military had become part-time. So I had to figure out full-time, and I knew it was not going to be retail, you know? And so I was trying to figure out like what direction I really wanted to go in. And so I think that those 2 years that I spent in New York really just kind of gave me a little bit of grounding You know, again, I was away from everything I knew and everyone I knew, you know, trying to figure it out and make it work. Ultimately, I ended up traveling from New York to Seattle, and that's in my book. And once I got to Seattle, I had a best friend that was living there at the time. I spent 30 days at her house, and I began to start my new business. And when I finished, getting my new business up and running, I traveled from Seattle to Texas, Houston at the time. And when I got to Houston, I said, okay, this is where I'm going to be. I'm going to be in Texas. I'm going to run my business. This is what I'm going to do. And so it's like if you look at the U.S., Mississippi's over here, Texas is here. And I went to New York, then I went to Seattle, and then I came to Texas. So I almost went around the U.S., to come back to that place where I needed to be. But sometimes we have to do that.
Yeah. So, what was the business then? What did you decide on?
Well, at the beginning, so this was before I had that conversation with a nice lady about life coaching. So this was way before I got into life coaching. But in college, I had started a business for event planning. And so when I came to Houston, that's what I decided to pick up again was my event planning company.
Okay. So at what moment then did you decide when you wanted to shift gears then? So obviously the conversation with the woman about the life coaching happened at a certain point. Was there anything that led up to that? Was there any events or experiences that made you think it's time for a change?
Yes, so I got to Houston, I'm doing the event planning, and it was great. I was doing well, but there was one thing, my faith and my spirituality is very important to me. And it seemed like I left it out of what I was doing. And that kind of bothered me. So I was doing this event planning, and I was doing all kinds of stuff, planning all types of events, and it was great, but it wasn't reflective of who I truly was. Like it was this lifestyle that I never intended to live. And so, that's where I think I started having these, asking myself these different questions. And I found myself in the weight loss industry by accident. But again, there's no coincidences. And like I said, when I really enjoyed that. I was still, at the time, doing my event planning. I was working, I had just started working on my book when I started doing the weight loss. And I felt like something was missing. I just felt like something was missing. And then, so I tried to pour it into my clients there, and so when my clients would come in, we were only supposed to weigh them, measure them, and look at their food diaries. But I would go a little bit deeper, and ask questions about their life. Like, what happened over the past couple of days? Not like, what happened? Why'd you eat that? But more like, what happened? Did something happen in your life that caused you to kind of, not feel like staying on track, or you had to have that piece of cake, or, you wanted to go off plan because work was really hard. Like, what's going on with you? And I took a true interest in their lives because I realized there was that connection. Weight loss is not just about food and exercise. It's also a mental state. Everything in our lives is a mental state. And, and of course I didn't know it as much then as I do now, but then I realized, yeah, you can't lose weight if your mind's not right. If you're not in that mindset to lose weight, if you're not ready, if things are happening in your life, you're going to allow them to take precedence if diet or lose precedence, if that makes any sense. And so, and then, like I said, the lady, I still remember her face, to this day, but she was just like, you're so caring. You care so much about what's going on with us and the person. You really should be a life coach. And like I said, I started looking into it, and I wasn't sure. So I tabled it. And a couple of months later, Like I said, I ended up going over to Puerto Rico. And once I got to Puerto Rico, I dug a little bit deeper and I kind of said, I really want to help people, but not just help people. Because if you think about it, in event planning, that's what I was doing. I was helping people. You have an event that you want to plan. You have this idea of something that you want to see come to fruition, right? And so I would take that idea and I would help it. That's what an event planner does. They take your idea, they plan it out, and they bring it to life. But I didn't want to just do that with events. I don't consider myself a people pleaser. But I like to see people happy. I like to see the smile on people's faces when they get the result of the thing that they've been trying and working so hard for, or the thing that they've imagined in their head, right? And so I just kept digging, like, what is it I want to do? I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't want to be a teacher necessarily, but what is it that I wanted to do? And so I always had that question in the back of my mind. Well, a few months after I returned from Puerto Rico, I actually ended up deploying, call for deployment to Iraq. And so when I deployed to Iraq, that is when I made the final decision to go into life coaching.
All right, awesome. So was there something that happened while you were out there that sort of tweaked something in your head as to say, right, this is it? Or was there something else? I mean, was there a very specific moment that caused it, or was it a bit more sort of little things adding up instead?
I think it was little things adding up. Over the course of the time that I was in Iraq, I had a lot of soldiers that would come to me with issues and, things going on back home, or even things going on out there, trying to decide what was next. Because there were a lot of people that were in the reserves that were there. They weren't all just active duty soldiers. And so I found myself on the steps of my C hut, which is a container housing unit. That's where we slept. So I found myself sitting on the steps of my C hut quite often with a soldier next to me, and I'm counseling them. And I began to realize that either I need to be a counselor or I need to be a life coach, or both. And I chose life coach because that's when I saw where the connection was, and that's where I saw how I could truly help people.
Right. So how long ago was that then? How long ago was the transition?
That was about 10 years ago.
Right. Okay. So has there been any turning points that you can think of that has led you to where you are now? Is there anything that you could share that maybe shaped you into the person you are now within those 10 years?
Honestly, over the past 10 years, I've, like most people, I've had like different encounters in different situations. I got married during that time period, and just all sorts of little nuances here and there. But I think I can't say that anything astounding happened in the past 10 years. But what I can say is that it was everything that had happened that led up to that point. It's taken me this time to carry it out. And it doesn't necessarily have to take that long for everyone else, but we hit all these little roadblocks along the way. And again, I say these are like little identifying factors of who you are, of, the different situations and circumstances and jobs and positions and activities. All of that helps to kind of build upon each other, right? And I think that I've been blessed to be able to spend these last few years building on the knowledge of not just who I am, but knowledge that I've gained along the way, it's not just the indicators of you as a person that you get from those experiences, but there's also information from those experiences that you can use for what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So a lot of times we say, well, I don't know why I was a delivery guy. That didn't do anything for me. That has nothing to do with what I'm trying to do with my life. But then if you look at being a delivery person and what you learned while being that delivery person, and you apply it to what it is you're trying to do now or where you're trying to go, you start to see a connection that, again, it shaped you. And so, again, I can't say that there was like a pivotal thing that happened. I think that we all have a moment where everything's supposed to connect, and it'll start to happen. But you have to keep working towards it and putting to use all those pieces that you gathered along the way. And I think that's kind of what I've been doing over these past few years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, in my mind now, it's kind of like I'm comparing it. So, like, over the 10 years, you've had, like, loads of little things, but before that, there was a lot going on. So, how do you feel then when you sort of compare things like prior to the transition to life coaching to then post transition to life coaching? How things panned out, like if you were to compare the two?
I would just say that, that things are great because I feel like now I'm settling into where I'm supposed to be. Again, remember how earlier I said that I don't believe in coincidences. And so, and I told you that I was supposed to go back. I mean, by paper and contract, I was supposed to go back into active duty, but somehow I ended up in the reserves. Had I never went reserves, I would have never had the opportunity for a dual career. I would have never had the opportunity to be in the military and have a civilian, career, which means I would have never explored that other part of me outside of the military. I would have continued to be an outstanding soldier because I did that. And I would have, done some things possibly on the side, but I don't think I would have ever realized the fullness of who I truly am. Now I'm not in the military at all any longer, and I'm completely, a civilian. Well, that transition did happen over these past 10 years. And so I can say that was pivotal too, just transitioning to full-time. This is who you are. This is what you do. But I would have never, it could have taken longer. I could be, getting out the military right now and then starting that whole 10-year process. So, I could look at it like that. Again, I think that when things happen to us in life or we go through different experiences, we have a tendency to blame it instead of applaud it. And if we take on the applaud position as opposed to the blame position, I think it shapes us a little bit better and it helps move things along faster. If I were to sit here and say, man, I wasted all those years in the military, because I could say that, then how would that benefit me now? Or I could say, man, if they would have let me stay in the military, let me stay on active duty, I wouldn't have had to do X, Y, Z. That could be true, but then would I be where I am now? And so I'm a lot further along. I believe that, I've done a lot. I know I've done a lot more than most of my peers that grew up with me in the military. And because most of them are still in the military, and so I think I'm happier now because I am my own person. And so, and I'm doing what I was purposed to do, not saying that wasn't part of my purpose, but ultimately at this point in my life, I'm where I'm supposed to be.
All right. So it's definitely a big change then. So from when a lot of things happened in a fairly short space of time, and then everything seems to have rounded off because you found out what you really wanted to do. I mean, it's definitely helpful when you discover something that you actually want to do, that you feel good about doing, because it's definitely a difficult situation to be in when you start doing things that, the only way I can explain it is you start doing things for other reasons other than because it's what you want to do. So if you've got another reason for doing it that isn't because I want to, it feels like I really want to do it, then that reason is kind of defining you, I guess, more than you want to do it. So it's looking external, I guess, more than looking internal. So just to round things off, then, if you could break everything down, so all of the experiences that you've been through in the military and post-hurricane, and then all the traveling that you did, and transition in your career, and all the things that we've been talking about, if you could boil the whole thing down into maybe three lessons that you've learned that you'd like everybody else to take away from us chatting, to do your best to keep it to three. If you could boil it all down to three core lessons, what would they be?
One, I guess I would say definitely be true to yourself. And what I mean by that is kind of piggybacking on what you said a few minutes ago. Instead of doing what you think you should be doing, and because there's a difference between thinking and your vision and purpose, but instead of doing what other people think you should be doing or what you have to do for the moment to get by, do what you were created to do. And I know we talk about passion, how passion is a feeling, and some people say do what you're passionate about, but I'm saying be true to yourself. You, as an individual, every person has a unique set of talents, gifts, skills, and abilities that's unique to only them. You also come along with, ideas that were given to you. Even if you were given an idea and I was given the exact same idea, the end product or end result will be different because of those skills, gifts, talents, and abilities that we each possess. You can produce your product with that same idea, but it's not going to look the same as mine. And so, that's the being true to yourself is doing, for lack of better phrases, doing you. Do you. Don't worry about everybody else. Don't compare yourself to others. Sometimes it's bad to compare yourself to yourself, but do what's true to you, like what you were created innately to do. So that would be my first one. And then my second would be, don't always look at your experiences as something negative, even if they were horrific, even if it was like the worst thing in the world. It still created the person that's standing before you, regardless of how you want to look at it. It shaped you into who you are. And if who you are is not your best yet, then think about how you can make it your best out of, based off of those experiences. What great things you can get from it. Because your past should stay in the past, but you should still see how it built you into who you are. Notice those clues. Don't look at it negatively. Don't make all those experiences a bad thing. So again, take the good out of your experiences, not the bad. And then the last thing I probably would just say is, have a mindset to succeed. If you have the mindset that you will be successful in whatever you're doing, whether it's like my mom having a great day or getting $1 million in your bank account, it starts with you. It starts with you as a person, you internally. Honestly, everything that I've said has to do with you as a person. You know, being true to yourself, looking at your experience, looking at the good in your experiences, and having a mindset to succeed. All of that has to do with you as an individual. Because if you are doing, and I'm going to pour out to other people, if you're being true to yourself, then other people will benefit from that. If you are looking at your, looking for the good in all your experiences, and other people will benefit from that on the outside. Because look, what if someone did something wrong to you, and instead of you looking at, oh, that person is horrible, but you said, well, how could I help that person? Again, they're benefiting from that. And then by you having the mindset to succeed, if you succeed, those who are around you benefit by default. And so even though all of these things are about you, it doesn't make you a selfish person. It actually builds you into a better person, and it helps you to be able to give back to those that are around you in a good way, and be a good person in their presence, and not, be a bitter person who's doing something they don't like, who's worrying about all the negative things that happen in their lives, and who feels like, oh my God, I can't get ahead, So think about that. But those would be my three things. So those are 3 things I learned, along the way, was that I need to be true to myself, who I am, who I was created to be. Don't look at the negative in my experiences. I mean, take note of them, but don't dwell on them. And then have the mindset to succeed, that regardless of what I do, I will succeed in it.
Sounds good. They sound like very powerful 3 lessons there. So just before we go, how can the watchers or listeners of this contact you? So how could people find out more about you?
Of course, they can go to my website. It's www.kmjohnsondavis.com, or they can just put my name in, Google it, and everything pops up. Or you can go to Facebook, Instagram. I'm on both, and Twitter. So yeah, I like to get on social media. Sometimes I have some times where I'm not on, but most of the time I'm on there at least a few times a day. But the best place would be check out my website and go from there.
All right, awesome. Well, if you send me the links of everything, what I'll do is I'll put them in the notes for the show. And yeah, I'm very grateful that you took the time to come on to talk to me, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Well, thank you for having me.